Okay, so now I'm going to explain to you why you should use Linux. Reason number one, Linux gives you the control. And as a developer, that is always what you should be looking for. You can give up some of that control in order to save time, in order to not solve tedious problems. But as long as you're close to the metal and there isn't a bunch of layers of abstraction between you and what you're telling the computer to do, you can tell it to do anything. Linux is going to be the best possible environment because you're not going to have so many constraints on you. Reason number two is most of the internet is actually built on Linux. If you use a server, a backend, Amazon Web Services, DigitalOcean, Netlify, Google Cloud, Firebase, I can pretty much guarantee you that all of this stuff is built on Linux because Linux is free, it's open source, there's no licensing, and it continues to get better. Which leads me to the third point. If you can use Linux and get comfortable with the command line and get comfortable with installing programs to the command line, you're going to see this skill will carry forward to any type of programming you do. You're always going to be installing libraries to the command line, modifying files, that sort of thing. Not everything has a GUI. Not everything has a setting in the user interface. Sometimes you have to go into the command line and tell the computer, okay, this is what I want you to do. Hopefully I've sold you on Linux, and I promise you that after enough time, once you get comfortable with it, you're not going to want to go back. I certainly don't. I don't use Mac unless I have to for work, and I don't use Windows unless I'm going to play video games and the game isn't supported on Linux. I will still use my Windows computer. But outside of those reasons, I think if you're going to be a developer, Linux is the best experience by far. Now we're going to get started with the tutorial. You're going to need a thumb drive. This one here is 8 gigabytes. That should be fine. You're also going to want to need, obviously, a computer to install it on. This could either be a separate computer or, what in my case, we're going to do something called dual booting. Dual booting is when we take one hard drive and we're going to split it up into two parts. So one part is going to have Windows on here and the other is going to have Linux. That way I can still be in my office where I play games and stuff and record videos, but then also I can do software development on the same computer. If you have a second computer or you want to just wipe out your hard drive and have it only be Linux, that'll work too. But in this case, I'm going to teach you to install Linux on your existing system. All right, so the first thing you're going to want to do is download a program called Rufus. This will basically let you put the installer onto the thumb drive. So go ahead, go to rufus.ie. You could also find it on Google. It was the first result for me. And then we'll go down to latest releases. It looks like this is good. It's for Windows x64. It says standard. It was updated a few days ago. All right, so you should have Rufus running now. And then the next step, we're going to download Manjaro. So I went to manjaro.org. We're going to install it on a desktop here. So we're going to do x86. You can choose what's called a desktop environment. So a desktop environment basically is just how the computer looks. Plasma, I'm a big fan of. It looks a lot like Windows. So if you're familiar with Windows and the bottom taskbar and all that stuff, it's very similar in terms of its look. So we're going to go with Plasma Desktop. And so we're going to download this. Full is 3.6 gigabytes. So we're going to give this a second. All right, so our download of Manjaro has finished. Now we're going to go into Rufus. You should have plugged in the thumb drive. Then we need to select Manjaro. I saved mine to the desktop. So now we're just going to go ahead and hit start here. Warning, this will probably delete everything on the thumb drive, so make sure you don't have anything important on there. So hit OK. All right. So now it's writing the image to the USB drive. Rufus finished making our USB bootable. We're going to shut off our computer and we're going to try to run it from the thumb drive. Here it's the C drive, so let's try this. Shrink volume. All right. 1024 times 120. All right, 122.880. 122.880. Okay. Cool. So now we have this 120 gigs unallocated space. All right, so we've got our thumb drive plugged into the machine. Depending on your computer, you're gonna have to press something different. I think on mine it's the delete key. All right, so here in boot override, we have Windows, and then we have the jump drive. Let's try the first option. So, cool, Manjaro. So let's do this. So boot with open source drivers. So we'll hit enter. We've successfully booted from the thumb drive. So we're gonna hit launch installer. Now this should be a very straightforward install process with the exception of partitioning our hard drive. Put in your time zone, your language, hit next. Do your keyboard layout. Here we're doing US English and default. Next. If you're installing Linux on a computer that you only want to use Linux on, you don't have to worry about this step. All right, so we're gonna partition our free space now. So here, this is gonna be our root partition, and this is gonna be root here, and it's ext4. So hit OK. Now with our free space, we need to make 2 more small partitions. So this is going to be FAT32, and it's going to be 512 megabytes, and it's going to be boot EFI, and it's going to be our boot partition. So hit OK. And then the last one, this is going to be Linux swap. And this is going to be the swap partition. So what swap is, it basically, if your computer runs out of memory, it'll start using this part of your hard drive to persist data on your computer. So hit OK. So now that we've made all of our partitions, so looking at it one more time, we have some Windows stuff, and then these 3 new ones for Linux. So it looks good. We're going to call this Full Stack 101. No Office Suite. You can have one, but you can always install later if you want to. All right, so install now. And so after this is done, we're going to have Linux and Windows on the same computer. And then when we start up, we can choose between the two. All right. So now let's go ahead and restart the machine. We're now restarting. I've unplugged the thumb drive here. We don't need this anymore. And we're going to tell our motherboard or our BIOS to now use the bootloader. So if we go here and we go to, let's see, boot. So save changes. You should see a screen like this now, and you can choose. So you can choose Manjaro, or you can choose Windows. We're gonna go with Manjaro. you've successfully installed Linux, if you're seeing the screen and you don't have the thumb drive in your computer. If you do have the thumb drive in your computer, there is a decent chance that you're still loading the installer. So if this is unplugged and you're seeing the desktop here, then you've probably made it. We can go ahead and open the terminal. And the shortcut for that is Control, Alt, and T. And then we're going to do a command called neofetch. And boom, there you go. All right, so thanks for watching the video. The next one, we're going to cover the basics of using the terminal and the command line, installing programs. So thanks for watching. Hope you learned a lot. If you have any questions, post it in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.